The bullet whistled past Lena Norwood's ear, so close she felt the heat of it. And in that moment, she knew her father's debts had finally caught up with her in the worst possible way. She ducked behind the water trough outside the general store in Prescott, Arizona territory, her heart hammering against her ribs as splinters exploded from the wooden post beside her head. The men shouting her name weren't lawmen. They were collectors for Marcus Holloway, the lone shark who had owned her father's gambling markers before consumption took him 6 months ago. Now they wanted payment in blood or gold, and Lena had neither to give. "Miss Norwood, you might as well come peaceful," called out a voice she recognized as belonging to Cyrus Webb, Holloway's head enforcer. "Your daddy owed us $3,000, and one way or another, we are getting our due. $3,000 might as well have been $3 million. Lena worked as a seamstress and made barely enough to keep herself fed. She had already sold everything her father owned, every stick of furniture, every book, even his pocket watch. The money had covered maybe a tenth of what he owed, and Holloway had made it clear that selling her into servitude was an acceptable form of payment, not while she still had breath in her body. She glanced around desperately. Her mare, Susanna, was tied up 2 buildings down. If she could reach her, she might have a chance. The street was emptying fast as townspeople scattered, wanting no part of whatever violence was about to unfold. A woman with 2 small children hurried past, not meeting Lena's eyes. Lena took a deep breath, gathered her skirts, and ran. More shots rang out, kicking up dust at her heels. Someone screamed. She untied Susanna with shaking fingers, threw herself into the saddle in a most unladylike fashion, and kicked the horse into a gallop. Behind her, she heard shouting and the thunder of hoofbeats as Webb and his men mounted up to give chase. She rode hard through Prescott's Main Street, scattering chickens and drawing curses from a man loading his wagon. The October sun beat down mercilessly despite the late season, and sweat already dampened her collar. She urged Susanna toward the eastern road, the one that led toward the Verde River and beyond it, New Mexico territory. Lena had no plan except to put distance between herself and the men who wanted to own her. She had a canteen, the clothes on her back, maybe $12 sewn into the hem of her skirt, and the desperate hope that somewhere in this vast territory there might be a place where Marcus Holloway's reach could not find her. The chase continued for hours. Lena's pursuers were relentless, and though Susanna was a good horse, she was no racing mare. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Lena could see the dust cloud behind her growing closer. Her throat was parched, her lips cracked, and every muscle screamed in protest. She crossed the Verde River at a shallow ford, the water barely reaching Susanna's knees. On the far bank, the landscape shifted to rougher country, all red rock and scrub pine. Lena guided her horse into a narrow canyon, hoping the rocky ground would make tracking harder. The canyon walls rose steep and striated on either side, painted in shades of rust and cream. That was when she heard the crack of a rifle and felt Susanna stumble beneath her. The horse had not been shot, thank God, but she was spent. Lena dismounted and pulled the mare behind a large boulder just as Webb and 2 other men appeared at the canyon entrance. "We know you are in there, Miss Norwood," Webb called. His voice echoed off the stone walls. "There is no way out. That canyon dead ends about a 1/4 mile up. You have made this harder than it needed to be." Lena pressed her back against the boulder, trying to think. Her father's Colt revolver was in her saddlebag, loaded with 6 bullets. She had never shot at a person before, only tin cans and the occasional rattlesnake. Her hands trembled as she drew the weapon. She was 22 years old, and it seemed entirely possible she would not live to see 23. The men advanced slowly, their horses picking their way over the rocky ground. Lena could hear the creak of leather, the jingle of spurs. She peered around the boulder and fired once, more to slow them than with any hope of hitting her target. The shot went wide, sparking off a rock face, but it made the men pull up short. "Now that was foolish," Webb said, though she heard a note of caution in his voice now. "You have got, what, 5 more bullets? There are 3 of us. The mathematics do not favor you." He was right, of course. Lena's stomach twisted with fear. She looked up at the canyon walls, searching for any route of escape, but they were sheer and offered no purchase. Webb had been right about something else, too. The canyon dead ended. She was trapped. That was when she heard another horse approaching from behind the 3 men. A lone rider, moving at an easy lope despite the tense standoff. Webb and his companions turned, hands moving to their weapons. The rider who emerged from the lengthening shadows sat tall in the saddle on a buckskin gelding. He wore a dark hat pulled low, a canvas duster despite the heat, and had the weathered look of a man who spent more time under open sky than under any roof. As he drew closer, Lena could make out a strong jaw shadowed with a few days' growth of beard, and eyes the color of storm clouds. "Afternoon, gentlemen," the stranger said, his voice a low drawl that somehow carried authority. "This seems like an awful lot of firepower for one young woman." "This is no concern of yours, friend," Webb replied, his hand resting on his holster. "The lady has a debt to settle. We are simply here to collect." The stranger tilted his head slightly, considering this. Funny thing about debts. Most honorable men settle them in a court of law, not by chasing a woman into a canyon with guns drawn. Makes a person wonder what kind of debt this really is. "I told you, it is no concern of yours." Webb's voice had turned hard. "Ride on." The stranger made no move to leave. Instead, he swung down from his saddle with the easy grace of someone who had spent a lifetime on horseback. He stood perhaps 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of men who did hard physical work. Lena noticed the revolver on his hip, the rifle in his saddle scabbard, and the way he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to use both. "See, I cannot quite do that," the stranger said. "My mama raised me to have certain principles. One of them being that a man does not stand by while a woman is threatened." He looked past Webb toward Lena, and for just a moment their eyes met. Something passed between them, quick as lightning, a recognition of some kind though they had never met. "Miss, are you all right?" Lena found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "They work for a man named Marcus Holloway. My father owed him money. He died 6 months ago, and now they want me to pay his debts." The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Marcus Holloway out of Prescott." "I have heard of him, a man who deals in misery and calls it business." He turned back to Webb. "How much is the debt?" $3,000, Webb said flatly. "And it is growing every day with interest. Now step aside or you will be buying yourself more trouble than you want." $3,000. The stranger repeated it thoughtfully, as if turning the sum over in his mind. "And I am guessing Mr. Holloway is not the patient type who would accept payment in installments. You guess correct. Well then." The stranger's hand moved so fast, Lena almost missed it, his revolver clearing leather and leveling at Webb before the other man could blink. "Here is what is going to happen. You 3 are going to turn those horses around and ride back to Prescott. You are going to tell Marcus Holloway that Lena Norwood's debt is paid in full, and you are going to forget you ever saw her." Webb's face flushed with anger. "And why the hell would we do that?" "Because if you do not, I am going to make it my personal mission to ensure that every law enforcement officer in Arizona Territory knows about Marcus Holloway's business practices. I am going to testify in court about how I witnessed 3 armed men chasing down a defenseless woman. I am going to make so much trouble for Mr. Holloway that $3,000 will seem like pocket change compared to what it costs him. The stranger's voice was calm, almost pleasant, but there was steel beneath it. Oh, and also because I am a considerably better shot than the young lady, and I am currently aiming at your center mass. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats. One of Webb's companions, a younger man with a nervous face, shifted in his saddle. "Cyrus, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Tommy," Webb snapped. But Lena could see the calculation in his eyes. Whatever else he was, Webb was no fool. He was outdrawn, and the stranger clearly knew how to handle himself. This was no soft townsman who could be intimidated. Slowly, Webb raised his hands away from his weapons. "You have made a powerful enemy today, friend." "I have made many enemies in my time," the stranger replied. "I am still here. They mostly are not." He gestured with his revolver toward the canyon entrance. "Now get." Webb jerked his reins, wheeling his horse around. His 2 companions followed suit, and the 3 men rode back the way they had come. The stranger kept his weapon trained on them until they disappeared from view, and even then he waited, listening to the fading hoofbeats. Finally, he holstered his gun and turned to where Lena still crouched behind the boulder. He touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Miss Norwood, my name is Benjamin Parker. Most folks call me Ben. Are you hurt?" Lena stood on trembling legs, still clutching her father's Colt. Now that the immediate danger had passed, reaction was setting in. Her hands shook harder and she felt perilously close to tears. "I am all right, I think I—" The words stuck in her throat. Ben moved closer slowly as if approaching a spooked horse. "Easy now. You have had a fright, but you are safe. Let me have that before you accidentally shoot yourself." He gently took the revolver from her hands, engaged the safety, and tucked it into his belt. "There now. How about you sit down for a minute and catch your breath?" Lena found herself obeying, sinking down onto a flat rock. Her whole body felt like water. Ben retrieved a canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. She drank deeply, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she managed. "If you had not come along when you did." "No need to think about that now," Ben said. He crouched down so they were at eye level, and Lena got her first good look at his face. He was older than her, maybe 30 or so, with lines at the corners of his eyes that came from squinting into too many sunrises. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against his tanned skin. But his eyes were kind despite their steel-gray color, and his mouth had a natural set to it that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. "Those men," Lena said. "They will go back to Holloway. He will not just forget about this, and you threatened to expose him." "He will come after you too," Ben shrugged, unconcerned. "Marcus Holloway is a bully and a coward who hides behind men like Cyrus Webb. I have dealt with worse." He studied her face. "The real question is, what are you going to do? You cannot go back to Prescott, that much is certain." Lena had been trying not to think about that. She had no home now, no money, nowhere to go. The enormity of her situation threatened to overwhelm her. "I do not know," I thought. "I thought if I could just get far enough away, maybe I could start over somewhere, find work. But I do not even know where I was going. I was just running." Ben was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he stood and offered her his hand. "Well, Miss Norwood, it seems to me you have a few choices. You could try to make it on your own, but given that you were about to be cornered in a dead-end canyon, I would say your odds are not great. Or—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. Or you could accept my help. I am headed east toward New Mexico territory and then up into Colorado. I know people along the way, good people who might have worked for a seamstress. I could see you safely there." Lena looked up at him, at this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her life. Everything her mother had taught her about propriety screamed that traveling alone with an unknown man was madness. But her mother had died when Lena was 15, and the world had proven far less concerned with propriety than with survival. "Why would you help me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know me. You have already made an enemy of Marcus Holloway on my account. Why do more?" Ben smiled then, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges. "My mama did not just teach me not to stand by when women are threatened. She taught me that when you have the power to help someone, you do it. No questions, no debts. You just do it because it is right." He extended his hand a little further. "So what do you say, Miss Norwood? Will you let me help you?" Lena looked at his hand, calloused and strong, offered without expectation. She thought about Webb and his companions, about the long road ahead, about everything she was leaving behind. Then she reached out and placed her hand in his. "Call me Lena," she said. "And yes, thank you, Mr. Parker." "Ben," he corrected gently, helping her to her feet. "If we are going to be traveling together, we might as well be on friendly terms." They made camp that night in a small hollow several miles from the canyon, sheltered by a stand of juniper trees. Ben was efficient in his movements, clearly a man accustomed to living rough. He gathered wood for a small fire, unsaddled both horses and rubbed them down, and set about making coffee in a battered pot while Lena sat wrapped in a blanket he had insisted she take. "You do not have much in the way of supplies," Ben observed as he worked. It was not quite a question. "I did not exactly have time to pack," Lena admitted. "Everything happened so fast. One moment I was at the general store buying thread, and the next Webb and his men were shooting at me." Ben nodded, stirring something in a small pan that smelled like beans and salt pork. "We will need to resupply before we head into less settled country. There is a town called Quartzsite about 3 days' ride southeast. Small place, but the folks there mind their own business. We can get you proper trail clothes, more food, ammunition." "I cannot pay you back," Lena said quietly, shame coloring her cheeks. "I have almost nothing." "Did I ask you to pay me back?" Ben glanced at her, and there was no judgment in his expression, only gentle firmness. "Lena, I meant what I said earlier. No debts. You have been through enough without adding another weight to your shoulders." They ate in companionable silence as stars began to prick through the darkening sky. The beans were simple but hot and filling, and the coffee, though bitter, chased away the chill that came with nightfall in the high desert. Lena found herself studying Ben when he was not looking, trying to puzzle out what manner of man he was. He wore no badge, had the rough look of a cowhand or ranch worker, but spoke with education and carried himself with authority. A contradiction. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured after they had finished eating. "Of course. What were you doing in that canyon?" "You said you were headed east, but you came from the west." Ben smiled slightly, as if he had been expecting the question. "I was tracking a wild Mustang stallion. Beautiful animal, paint coloring, smart as they come. I have been following him for near about a week, hoping to get close enough to gentle him. When I heard the gunshots, I decided the horse could wait." He poured himself another cup of coffee. "Turned out to be the right choice. You could have been killed," Lena said. "Webb and his men would not have hesitated." "Neither would I have," Ben replied, and there was something in his tone that made her believe him absolutely. "I have been in tight spots before, Lena. I know when a man is bluffing and when he means business. Webb is a bully, like I said. Bullies back down when someone stands up to them." "Not always," Lena murmured, thinking of her father, of how Holloway's collectors had hounded him even as consumption ate him alive from the inside. Ben must have heard something in her voice because he set down his cup and looked at her directly. "Tell me about your father if you are willing." So Lena did. It all came spilling out in the firelight, the story she had held inside for 6 months. Her father had been a good man once, a clerk in a legal office, respectable and kind. But after her mother's death, something in him had broken. He had started drinking, then gambling, trying to fill the void her mother had left. The debts had piled up slowly at first, then faster. By the time Lena realized how bad things had gotten, it was too late. Holloway owned him. "He died in the spring," Lena said, her voice thick. "Consumption." I was holding his hand when he went. His last words were an apology. He knew what he was leaving me with. She swiped at her eyes angrily. "I tried to pay it. I sold everything. I worked every hour I could, but it was not enough. Holloway wanted it all at once, and when I could not give it to him, he suggested I could work off the debt in his saloon." The bitterness in her voice was acid. I knew what that meant, so I ran. Ben was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but fierce. "Your father made mistakes, but his debts died with him as far as I am concerned. No man worth the name would hold a daughter responsible for her father's gambling, and Marcus Holloway is going to learn that if I have anything to say about it." "You cannot fight him," Lena protested. "He has too many men, too much power in Prescott." "Maybe so," Ben acknowledged. "But we are not going to be in Prescott, and out here, power does not come from having the most men or the most money. It comes from knowing the land, knowing yourself, and being willing to do what is necessary to protect what matters." He met her eyes across the fire. "You matter, Lena Norwood. Do not ever let anyone tell you different." Something in Lena's chest loosened at those words. A knot of shame and fear she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Ben stood and moved to check on the horses one final time. "You should get some sleep. We have a long ride ahead tomorrow. I will take first watch." "Watch?" Lena looked around the dark campsite. "You think Webb might come back. I think it pays to be careful," Ben said. "But do not worry, I am a light sleeper. Get some rest." Lena curled up in the blanket near the fire, using her saddle as a pillow the way she had seen cowboys do. It was far from comfortable, but exhaustion dragged at her like a physical weight. As she drifted toward sleep, she was aware of Ben sitting with his back to a juniper tree, silhouetted against the stars, watching over the camp, over her. It should have felt strange, trusting this man she had known for only a few hours. Instead, it felt like the first safe thing that had happened to her in longer than she could remember. They rode out at first light, when the world was still painted in shades of gray and pink. Ben set a steady but not punishing pace, mindful of the fact that Lena was not accustomed to spending full days in the saddle. They followed game trails and dry washes, staying away from the main roads where possible. The landscape slowly changed as they traveled southeast. The red rocks gave way to desert scrubland, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear cactus. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into something that shimmered and wavered. Lena was grateful for the hat Ben had given her, though it was too large and kept slipping down over her eyes. They talked as they rode, the conversation coming easier than Lena would have expected. Ben told her about growing up on a ranch in western Texas, the youngest of 3 brothers. His mother had died when he was 17, his father 2 years later, and the ranch had gone to the eldest brother. "I did not much care for the idea of working for my brother," Ben admitted with a rueful smile. "We loved each other well enough, but we could never agree on how things should be done. So I took my inheritance, bought a good horse and a better rifle, and headed west. That was near about 10 years ago. I have been drifting ever since. Cowhand work mostly, sometimes scouting, a little bit of bounty hunting when the pay was good and the criminals deserved catching. Do you ever regret it? Lena asked. Not staying, I mean, not having a place to call home. Ben considered this, one hand resting easy on his saddle horn, the other holding the reins loosely. Sometimes, he admitted. Usually in winter when the snow is deep and the work is scarce. But then spring comes around again and I remember why I left. There is freedom in the drifting. No one to answer to but yourself. No one's expectations to live up to except your own. That sounds lonely, Lena said quietly. It can be, Ben agreed, but it can also be peaceful. He glanced at her, and something in his expression made Lena's breath catch. Though I am finding that the right company makes even the longest trail seem shorter. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert sun. She looked away, focusing on Susanna's ears, trying to settle the sudden flutter in her chest. She barely knew this man. It was ridiculous to feel this pull toward him, this sense of connection. And yet she could not deny it was there, growing stronger with each passing hour. They crossed the Gila River late that afternoon, the water running low and sluggish this time of year. On the far bank, they encountered a small group of Apache traders heading west with baskets and blankets to sell. Ben greeted them in their own language, his pronunciation careful but respectful. The traders regarded Lena with curiosity but no hostility, and after a brief exchange with Ben, they went on their way. "You speak Apache?" Lena asked, impressed. "A little," Ben said. "Enough to be polite and negotiate trade. I spent a winter once snowed in near a White Mountain Apache settlement. They could have left me to freeze, but they took me in, shared their food and fire. I figured the least I could do was learn some of their language." He smiled. "Besides, it is useful. The Apache know this land better than any white man ever will. Make friends with them, and they will teach you how to survive out here. Make enemies, and you will not last long." They camped that night beside a seasonal creek that still held a trickle of water. Ben shot a rabbit while Lena gathered wood, and they roasted it over the fire along with wild onions he dug up nearby. It was the best meal Lena had eaten in days, and she said so. "Wait until we get to Quartzsite," Ben said. "There is a woman there, Mrs. Chen, runs a boarding house. She makes the best dumplings you have ever tasted. Came over from China to cook for railroad workers, decided she liked Arizona better and stayed." "You have been to Quartzsite before then," Lena said. "A few times. It is a good place to rest between jobs. Small enough that strangers do not attract too much attention, big enough to have what you need." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I am thinking we will stay there a few days. Let you recover from the hard riding, get properly outfitted. Then we will head north toward the New Mexico border." Lena nodded, though part of her was surprised to feel a twinge of disappointment at the thought of reaching their destination. These past 2 days, despite the danger and discomfort, had held a strange kind of magic. Out here under the vast sky with no one but Ben for company, the world seemed both infinitely large and intimately small. She felt more herself than she had in years, stripped of the expectations and judgments of town life. That night, as she lay wrapped in her blanket watching the stars wheel overhead, Lena heard Ben's quiet voice from where he sat keeping watch. "You doing all right over there?" "Yes," she replied. "Just thinking." "About what?" Lena hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than evasion. "About how strange it is that 3 days ago I was running for my life, and now I am lying under the stars feeling more at peace than I have in months. It does not make sense." She heard the smile in Ben's voice when he answered. "Peace does not always make sense, Lena. Sometimes it just is. Best to accept it while you have got it, because God knows it does not last forever." Is that cowboy wisdom? Lena asked, amused. That is life wisdom, Ben corrected. Which I suppose amounts to the same thing when you have spent as much time in the saddle as I have. Lena smiled into the darkness and let the sound of the wind through the mesquite lull her toward sleep. They reached Quartzsite, Arizona on the afternoon of the third day, tired and dust-covered but in good spirits. The town was exactly as Ben had described it. A small collection of adobe and wooden buildings clustered around a single main street. A hand-painted sign proclaimed a population of 212 souls, though Lena suspected that number fluctuated with the seasons and the fortunes of the nearby mines. Ben led them directly to Mrs. Chen's boarding house, a whitewashed adobe structure with a shaded porch and bright red door. The woman who emerged to greet them was small and round, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Benjamin Parker," she said, her accent thick but her English clear. "You look like something the cat dragged through the desert." "Good to see you too, Mrs. Chen," Ben said, swinging down from his saddle with a genuine smile. "I have brought a friend who needs a safe place to rest and a hot meal." Mrs. Chen's sharp gaze moved to Lena, and Lena had the distinct impression of being thoroughly assessed in about 3 seconds. Whatever Mrs. Chen saw must have satisfied her because her stern expression softened slightly. "You look half dead, girl. Come inside. You too, Benjamin. Put those horses in my stable. My grandson will tend to them." The boarding house interior was spotlessly clean and surprisingly cool, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. Mrs. Chen showed Lena to a small but comfortable room with a real bed, a washstand with a mirror, and a window that looked out on a small garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. "You rest," Mrs. Chen commanded. "I bring water for washing, then food, then you sleep. Benjamin says you need safe place, you have it. No one bothers my guests." "Thank you," Lena said, her throat tight with sudden emotion. "I cannot pay much, but I have a little money and I can sew. If you need any mending done," Mrs. Chen waved a hand dismissively. "We talk about that later. Now you rest." Lena did not argue. She washed the grime of the trail from her face and hands, changed into her one spare dress, and went down to the dining room where Mrs. Chen had laid out a feast. There were the promised dumplings, plus rice, stir-fried vegetables, and chicken in a savory sauce that made Lena's mouth water. Ben was already there, cleaned up himself and looking more relaxed than Lena had yet seen him. He stood when she entered, pulling out a chair for her with old-fashioned courtesy. "Feel better?" he asked. "Like a new person," Lena admitted, sitting down. "I had forgotten what it felt like to be clean." They ate with the focused attention of people who had been living on trail rations for days. Mrs. Chen watched with satisfaction, refilling their plates and teacups without being asked. When they finally pushed back from the table, too full to eat another bite, she nodded approvingly. "Good. You too skinny, both of you. You stay here, you eat proper food, put meat on bones." "We will be staying a few days if you have the room," Ben said. "Lena needs to get outfitted for travel and I need to pick up some supplies." "I have room," Mrs. Chen confirmed. "You want your usual room, Benjamin, please." After dinner, Ben walked Lena out to the porch where they could catch the evening breeze. The sun was setting, painting the western sky in shades of orange and purple. A few people passed on the street, but no one paid them particular attention. Quartzsite, Lena was learning, was exactly the kind of place where minding one's own business was considered a virtue. "Tomorrow I will take you to the general store," Ben said. "Get you some proper riding clothes, boots, a decent hat. Maybe a better sidearm too if you are willing to learn to use it." "I should learn," Lena agreed, though the thought made her nervous. I do not ever want to be as helpless as I was in that canyon again." "You are not helpless," Ben said firmly. "You ran when you needed to run, you found cover when you were cornered, and you had the courage to stand your ground. A lot of people would have just given up." He looked at her with something like admiration. "You are stronger than you know, Lena Norwood." Lena felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. In the fading light, Ben's eyes were more silver than gray, and the way he looked at her made her feel seen in a way she never had before. Not as a burden or a debt or a problem to be solved, but as a person worth knowing. "Ben," she said quietly, "why are you really doing this? And please do not tell me it is just because your mother raised you right. There is more to it than that." Ben was silent for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to the darkening horizon. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, almost wondering. "I have been drifting for 10 years, like I told you, moving from place to place, job to job, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. I told myself it was freedom, and maybe it was, but it was also running, if I am honest. Running from expectations, from responsibilities, from the fear of being tied down and trapped the way I saw my father trapped on that ranch." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And then I rode into that canyon and saw you there, scared but not broken, and something in me just knew. I cannot explain it better than that. I knew you were someone worth fighting for, worth staying for, at least for a while." Lena's heart was beating very fast now. "And after a while, after you get me safely to New Mexico or Colorado, what then?" Ben turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I would like to find out if you would want that too. It was too fast, too soon, too everything." Lena knew that. But knowing it did not change the truth of what she felt. This pull toward this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying. "I would want that," she whispered. Ben smiled, slow and warm, and reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered for just a moment against her cheek, and Lena felt that touch all the way to her toes. "Good," he said softly. "That is good." They spent 5 days in Quartzsite, and they were some of the best days of Lena's life. Ben was true to his word about outfitting her properly. At the general store, a cheerful establishment run by a man named Horace Gibbs, Lena was fitted for split riding skirts, sturdy boots, a proper hat with a chin strap, and a lightweight canvas jacket for cool mornings. "You will want to dress in layers," Ben advised as she tried on the various items. "Desert days are hot, but the nights can get cold, especially as we go higher into the mountains." Lena emerged from the changing room in her new riding outfit and caught the look on Ben's face before he schooled it into neutrality. It was a look of pure appreciation, and it sent warmth spreading through her chest. "How do I look?" she asked, turning so he could see the full effect. "Like you were born to ride," Ben said, and his voice was just a little rougher than usual. "Those will serve you well." He also insisted on buying her a better gun, a lighter revolver than her father's Colt and easier for her smaller hands to manage. Over the next few days, he took her out to a sheltered canyon outside of town and taught her to shoot properly. "Do not jerk the trigger," he instructed, standing close behind her to adjust her stance. "Squeeze it smooth and steady, and breathe. You have to breathe." Lena was acutely aware of his presence, the warmth of his body near hers, the low rumble of his voice in her ear. It made concentration difficult, but she did her best. By the 3rd day of practice, she was hitting the tin cans they had set up on a rock more often than not. "There you go," Ben said, pride evident in his voice. "Keep practicing like that and you will be a crack shot in no time." "I hope I never have to shoot at anything but tin cans," Lena said, lowering the gun. "So do I," Ben agreed. "But if the need arises, at least now you will be able to defend yourself." In the evenings, they sat on Mrs. Chen's porch and talked for hours, learning each other's stories. Ben told her about his brothers, his time working cattle drives, the year he spent in the mountains of Colorado learning to trap. Lena told him about her mother, about learning to sew and embroider, about the books she loved to read when she could get her hands on them. "What is your favorite?" Ben asked one evening, genuinely curious. "That is like asking me to choose a favorite star," Lena protested. But after a moment's thought, she said, "I suppose if I had to pick one, it would be Jane Eyre. I must have read it a dozen times." There is something about Jane's determination to stay true to herself, no matter what the world throws at her, that always gave me courage. "I have not read that one," Ben admitted. "Most of my education came from experience rather than books, but I like the sound of it." A woman who stays true to herself despite everything. Reminds me of someone I know. Lena blushed, pleased. "What about you? Any favorite stories?" "I am partial to the Odyssey," Ben said. "My mother read it to us when we were boys. I did not understand half of it at the time, but I loved the idea of the journey, the adventure. The way Odysseus had to use his wits as much as his strength." He smiled. "Though I always felt sorry for Penelope, waiting all those years. Seems to me she was the one who really showed courage." They talked about dreams too, the ones they had given up and the ones they still held close. Lena admitted that she had always wanted to see the ocean, to know what it felt like to stand on the edge of something so vast and powerful. "I could take you there someday," Ben said softly. "California is not so far. A few months' travel, maybe less." "You mean that?" Lena asked, searching his face. "I do not say things I do not mean," Ben replied. "If you want to see the ocean, Lena, I will take you to see it." It was a promise and something more, a statement of intention that made Lena's heart race. This was no longer just about getting her to safety. This was about a future, one they might build together. On their fourth evening in Quartzsite, Ben took Lena to a small cantina at the edge of town, where a group of musicians were playing. The music was lively, a mix of Mexican and American influences, all guitars and fiddles and voices raised in song. Ben bought them each a glass of weak beer and led her to a table in the corner where they could watch the dancing. "You dance?" Lena asked, swaying slightly to the music. "I am not saying I am good at it," Ben warned, "but I know the basic steps if you want to give it a try." They joined the other couples on the small dance floor, and Ben proved himself an adequate if not graceful dancer. What he lacked in skill, he made up for in enthusiasm, guiding Lena through the steps with gentle pressure on her waist and hand. Lena found herself laughing, something she had not done nearly enough of in recent years, as they spun and stumbled through the dance. When a slower song began, Ben pulled her closer, and Lena let herself relax into his embrace. Her head fit perfectly against his shoulder, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. They swayed together, barely moving, and Lena felt something shift between them, deepening into something that felt almost inevitable. "Lena," Ben murmured into her hair. "I need you to know something." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "What?" "When we leave here, when we head north toward New Mexico, we are going to cross some rough country. It is going to be hard travel, and there is always the chance that Holloway's men might still be looking for you. I need you to know that no matter what happens, I am with you. I am not going to leave you or abandon you. You are not alone anymore." Lena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, the kind that came from being seen and valued. "I know," she said. "I trust you, Ben." He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. "I am going to kiss you now, if that is all right with you." Lena's answer was to rise up on her toes and close the distance between them herself. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. Then it deepened, and Lena felt heat bloom through her entire body. Ben's arms came around her, holding her close, and she gripped his shoulders, anchoring herself against the tide of feeling that threatened to sweep her away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you in that canyon," he admitted. "I have been wanting you to," Lena confessed, and his delighted laugh made her smile. They left Quartzsite 2 days later, well-provisioned and well-rested. Mrs. Chen sent them off with a bag full of dumplings and stern instructions to take care of themselves. Lena hugged the older woman impulsively, grateful beyond words for her kindness. "You come back and visit," Mrs. Chen commanded. "Bring this cowboy with you. I keep you both fed." "We will," Lena promised, and meant it. The journey northeast toward the New Mexico border took them through increasingly rugged country. They followed the Bill Williams River, then cut north through high desert and eventually into the foothills of the mountains. The landscape was spectacular, all towering rock formations and deep canyons, painted in impossible shades of red and gold and purple. They crossed the border into New Mexico territory on a crisp October morning, the air sharp and clean in their lungs. Ben pointed out the landmarks, naming the mountains and rivers they passed. This was the San Francisco River, he told her. Beyond those peaks lay the Gila Wilderness, some of the most remote and beautiful country in the territory. "Are we going through the wilderness?" Lena asked, eyeing the distant mountains with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Around the edge of it," Ben said. "There is a small settlement called Alma about 3 days' ride from here. I know a rancher there, good man named Tom Whitfield. He might have work, and if not, he will know who does." They made camp that night beside the San Francisco River, the water running clear and cold over smooth stones. Ben caught 2 trout for their dinner while Lena set up camp, the tasks dividing between them now with the ease of long practice. They had fallen into a rhythm over the past weeks, anticipating each other's needs, working together like a team. After they had eaten, they sat close together by the fire, Lena leaning against Ben's shoulder. His arm came around her naturally, and she sighed with contentment. "Tell me about this rancher friend of yours," Lena said. "Tom Whitfield." "Good man, like I said. He and his wife run a cattle operation in the foothills. They have got 3 daughters, all grown now but still helping with the ranch. Tom has always been fair to his workers, and Sarah, his wife, is one of the best cooks I have ever met. Not quite up to Mrs. Chen's standards, but close." Ben smiled at the memory. "I worked for them one summer, 5 years ago now, helped them drive a herd north to market. Tom paid me fair and treated me like family. I have tried to stop by when I am in the area ever since." "You think they would have worked for me?" Lena asked. "I think Sarah Whitfield would snatch up a good seamstress in a heartbeat. Ranch life is hard on clothes, and mending is a never-ending job. Plus, they have got a small house that sits empty most of the year, used to be for the ranch foreman before he passed on. If Tom is willing, we could fix it up, make it livable." He paused, and Lena heard the careful hope in his voice. "Give us a place to stay for a while, together." Lena's heart swelled. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." Ben turned to kiss her temple, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to coals. The next day they followed the river north, the mountains growing larger on either side. The air was noticeably cooler here, and Lena was grateful for the jacket Ben had insisted she buy. Aspens grew in golden groves on the hillsides, their leaves trembling in the breeze like coins. They were riding through one such grove when they heard the sound of hoofbeats behind them, coming fast. Ben's hand went immediately to his rifle, and Lena felt her stomach drop. Had Webb somehow tracked them this far? But the riders who emerged from the trees were not Holloway's men. There were 5 of them, rough-looking cowboys with trail dust on their clothes and hard eyes. The one in the lead, a big man with a scarred face and a missing ear, held up a hand in a gesture that was more command than greeting. "Hold up there, friend," he called out. Ben reined in his horse but kept his hand near his weapon. Lena moved her own mount closer to his, pulse racing. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Ben asked, his tone carefully neutral. The big man grinned, showing teeth stained brown from tobacco. "That depends. We are looking for a woman traveling with a cowboy. She is about medium height, dark hair, pretty. Her name is Lena Norwood. You would not happen to know anything about that, would you?" Lena felt ice slide down her spine. These were not Webb's men, but they were clearly working for Holloway. He had sent another crew after them, and this one looked far more dangerous than the first. "I might," Ben said slowly. "What is your interest in Miss Norwood?" "She owes a debt to a friend of ours," the big man said. "We are just here to collect and take her back where she belongs." "What if I told you the debt was paid?" Ben asked. The big man laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Then I would say you are a liar, friend. Marcus Holloway does not forgive debts, and he does not appreciate people interfering in his business. Now, you can hand over the girl and ride away with your skin intact, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." Ben's jaw tightened. Lena could see him calculating the odds. 5 against 1 were not good numbers, even for someone as skilled as Ben. And they could not run, not with these men already this close and fresh horses under them. "Lena," Ben said quietly, not taking his eyes off the men. "When I tell you to ride, you ride hard and do not look back. Follow the river north until you reach Alma. Find Tom Whitfield and tell him Ben sent you. He will keep you safe." "No," Lena said, her voice shaking but firm. "I am not leaving you." "Lena, how touching," the big man interrupted. "But nobody is going anywhere except back to Prescott." He gestured to his companions. "Boys, take the girl. If the cowboy tries to stop you, put a bullet in him." 3 things happened at once. Ben's rifle came up, his shot taking one of the riders clean out of his saddle. Lena drew her revolver and fired at another, more out of panic than aim, but her bullet struck the man's horse and sent it rearing. And Ben shouted, "Ride!" with such command that Lena's body obeyed before her mind could argue. She kicked Susanna into a gallop, branches whipping at her face as she plunged deeper into the aspen grove. Behind her, she heard more gunshots, men shouting, Ben's voice rising above the chaos. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back to help him, but she knew she would only be a liability in a gunfight. She rode hard for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, following the river as Ben had instructed. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision. What if they killed him? What if she never saw him again? The thought was unbearable. Susanna was laboring beneath her, sides heaving, when Lena finally pulled up to let the horse catch her breath. She listened, but heard no sounds of pursuit. Maybe they had not bothered to follow. Maybe they were all focused on Ben. She had to go back. She could not just leave him to face those men alone. Lena turned Susanna around and started back the way she had come, moving more slowly now, trying to be quiet. As she drew closer to where they had been ambushed, she heard voices and reined in. Dismounting to approach on foot through the trees, she could see the clearing. 2 men lay on the ground, one clearly dead, the other groaning and clutching a wounded leg. The big man with the scarred face was still mounted, and he had a gun pointed at Ben, who stood with his hands raised, his rifle on the ground several feet away. You got some skill, I will give you that, the big man was saying. But it is over now. Tell me where the girl went and I will make it quick. Go to hell, Ben said flatly. The big man shrugged. Have it your way. Lena did not think. She raised her revolver, braced it the way Ben had taught her, took a breath and fired. The shot took the big man in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in his saddle. His gun went off, the bullet going wild. Ben moved like lightning, grabbing his rifle and bringing it to bear on the remaining two men who had their hands up in surrender now, clearly wanting no more of this fight. You shot me, the big man bellowed, clutching his bleeding shoulder. You shot me, you crazy woman. Lena stepped out of the trees, her gun still trained on him, her hands remarkably steady now that the moment had passed. And I will shoot you again if you do not drop that gun. The big man's weapon hit the ground. Ben moved quickly, kicking it away and then checking the other men to make sure they were disarmed. The one Lena had shot glared at her with pure hatred, but there was fear in his eyes too now. Lena, Ben said, and there was a world of emotion in her name. Relief, pride, exasperation, affection. I thought I told you to ride. You did, Lena agreed, finally lowering her gun. I chose not to listen. Despite everything, Ben smiled. Thank God for that. They tied up the three men who were still conscious and left them with their wounded companion. Lena felt a pang of guilt about leaving injured men, but Ben pointed out that the one with the leg wound was not in mortal danger, and his companions could tend to him until they worked themselves free. They will live, Ben said grimly, which is more than they deserved after what they tried to do. They rode north at a hard pace, not stopping until darkness forced them to make camp. Only then, with a fire burning and the horses tended, did the full weight of what had happened crash down on Lena. She began to shake, great tremors that rattled through her whole body. Ben was at her side in an instant, pulling her into his arms. You are all right, he murmured into her hair. You are safe, I have got you. I could have lost you, Lena said, the words muffled against his chest. If I had ridden away like you said, if I had not come back, they would have killed you. Maybe, Ben allowed. Or maybe I would have figured something out, but you did come back, and that shot you made saved my life. He pulled back to look at her, his hands cupping her face. You are the bravest woman I have ever met, Lena Norwood, and I love you for it. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and absolutely right. I love you too, Lena whispered. I think I have loved you since that first day in the canyon when you stood up for me against Webb. Ben kissed her then, and it was different from the kiss in Quartzsite. This was desperate and grateful and full of the knowledge of how easily they could have lost each other. Lena kissed him back with everything she had, trying to pour all her fear and relief and love into that single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ben rested his forehead against hers. We need to keep moving. Holloway is not going to stop sending men. Not until we are so far away that it is not worth his time anymore. How far is that? Lena asked. Far, Ben admitted. Maybe Colorado, maybe further, but we will get there, Lena. I promise you that, and when we do, we will find a place to settle, at least for a while. Somewhere we can catch our breath and figure out what comes next. Together, Lena said. It was not a question. Together, Ben confirmed. If you will have me. I will have you, Lena said, and meant it with her whole heart. They reached the settlement of Alma 3 days later, tired and watchful but unmolested. The town was small, just a handful of buildings clustered in a valley where 2 rivers met. The Whitfield Ranch lay another few miles beyond, and Ben led them there with the confidence of someone who knew the way well. The ranch house was a long adobe structure with a wide porch and a barn that looked newer than the house. Cattle grazed on the hillsides, fat and healthy. A woman was hanging laundry on a line when they rode up, and she turned with a smile that brightened when she recognized Ben. "Benjamin Parker, as I live and breathe," she called out. "Tom, come see who is here." The woman who approached was perhaps 50, with graying brown hair and a face that spoke of laughter and hard work in equal measure. A man emerged from the barn, tall and lean with weathered skin and kind eyes. He broke into a grin when he saw Ben. "Ben, you old dog, what brings you up this way?" Then his eyes fell on Lena, and his smile turned curious but welcoming. "And who is this?" "Tom, Sarah. This is Lena Norwood," Ben said, swinging down from his saddle. "Lena, meet Tom and Sarah Whitfield, the finest ranchers in New Mexico Territory and two of the best people I know." Lena dismounted, suddenly self-conscious about her trail-worn appearance. But Sarah Whitfield's handshake was firm and her smile genuine. "Any friend of Ben's is welcome here," Sarah said warmly. "Come inside, both of you. You look like you could use a good meal and a soft place to sit." Over dinner, Ben explained the situation, leaving out nothing. Tom and Sarah listened with growing concern, and by the time he finished, Tom's jaw was set in a hard line. "Marcus Holloway," he said, disgust clear in his voice. "I have heard of him. Runs his operation like a feudal lord, treating people like property." He looked at Lena with sympathy. "You are welcome to stay here as long as you need, Miss Norwood. Any man of Holloway's who shows up on my land will be met with a Winchester and a warning to leave." "We would not want to bring trouble to your door," Lena protested. "Trouble comes whether we invite it or not," Sarah said practically. "The question is whether we face it alone or with friends beside us. You are Ben's friend, which makes you ours. Now, let us talk about what you need." Over the next week, they settled into life at the Whitfield Ranch. True to Ben's prediction, Sarah was delighted to have a skilled seamstress on hand. She set Lena up in a corner of the ranch house with a good sewing machine and brought her baskets full of mending, curtains that needed hemming, and even a few new dresses she wanted made for her daughters. "I will pay you fair wages," Sarah insisted when Lena protested that room and board were payment enough. "A worker deserves her pay, and your work is excellent." Ben, meanwhile, made himself useful around the ranch, fixing fences, breaking a young horse that had been giving Tom trouble, and helping to move cattle to lower pastures for the winter. Lena watched him work from the porch sometimes, admiring the easy competence with which he handled the animals and the land. The small foreman's house that Ben had mentioned proved to be in better shape than expected. It was a 2-room cabin with a stone fireplace, a sleeping loft, and a small porch. Together, Lena and Ben spent their evenings cleaning it out, patching holes, making it habitable. "We could be happy here," Lena said one evening as they sat on the porch of the little house, watching the sun set over the mountains. "At least for a while." "We could," Ben agreed. He had one arm around her shoulders, and she was tucked against his side in a way that had become natural over the past weeks. "Question is, do you want to? Or do you still want to keep moving?" Lena thought about it. Part of her would always carry the urge to keep running to stay ahead of whatever danger might be following. But another part, a bigger part, was tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder. She wanted to put down roots, even if just for a season or two. "I want to stay," she said quietly. "If you do." Ben was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I have been running for 10 years, Lena, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. But this place with you, it feels different. It feels like maybe I could stop running, like maybe I could finally rest." "Then let us stay," Lena said. "Let us make a home here for however long it lasts." Ben turned to kiss her, soft and sweet, a promise of more to come. "All right then, we will stay." Winter came early to the mountains that year. By mid-November, snow dusted the peaks, and the mornings were cold enough to frost the water in the horse troughs. Lena and Ben moved into the little foreman's house, and Sarah Whitfield hosted a small party to celebrate, inviting neighbors from the surrounding ranches. It was at this party, surrounded by friendly faces and good food, that Ben cleared his throat and stood to make an announcement. "I want to thank Tom and Sarah for their hospitality," he began, looking only slightly uncomfortable at being the center of attention. "And I want to thank all of you for making Lena and me feel so welcome. This valley, this community, it is the first place I have felt like I belonged in a long time." He paused, then reached for Lena's hand, pulling her to her feet beside him. "And that is largely because of this woman right here. Lena Norwood is the bravest, strongest, kindest person I have ever met, and I would be a fool to let her go." He turned to face her fully now, and Lena's breath caught at the emotion in his eyes. "Lena, I do not have much to offer you. No ranch, no fortune, just myself and a promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you. But if you will have me, I would be honored to call you my wife." The room had gone completely silent. Lena felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Ben, I will marry you." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah was crying openly, and Tom clapped Ben on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him. Neighbors came forward to offer congratulations, and someone produced a bottle of good whiskey for toasting. In the midst of the celebration, Lena and Ben found a quiet moment together near the fireplace. Ben pulled her close, his hand cupping the back of her head as she rested against his chest. "I never thought I would find this," he murmured. "Never thought I would want to." "Neither did I," Lena admitted. "I was so focused on just surviving, I forgot to think about what I might want to live for." "And now?" Ben asked. "Now I know," Lena said, pulling back to look up at him. "I want to live for this, for us, for whatever life we can build together." They were married on a cold December morning in the small church in Alma. Sarah helped Lena sew a simple but beautiful dress from cream-colored silk, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Tom stood up as Ben's witness, and Sarah stood for Lena. The Whitfield daughters decorated the church with pine boughs and late-season wildflowers they had somehow managed to find. As Lena walked down the aisle toward where Ben waited, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear, the running, the desperate flight across the desert. The moment in the canyon when Ben had appeared like an answer to a prayer. Every mile they had crossed together, every river they had forded, every danger they had faced. She was worth every mile, Ben had told her once. But the truth was, he was worth it too. Worth the risk of opening her heart again, worth believing in a future beyond mere survival. The ceremony was simple, the words traditional, but when Ben slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her for all his days, Lena knew she had found something precious beyond measure. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Ben kissed her with such tenderness it made her cry, she knew she was finally, truly home. The winter passed in a blur of contentment. Lena continued her sewing work for Sarah and the other ranch wives in the valley, building a reputation for skill and fair prices. Ben worked the ranch alongside Tom, and in the evenings he came home to their little house where Lena would have dinner waiting. It was a simple life, even a hard one at times when the snow piled high and the work was brutal. But it was theirs, built together from nothing but determination and love. In late February, word reached them through a traveling merchant that Marcus Holloway had been arrested in Prescott. Apparently, the territorial marshal had finally taken an interest in his business practices, and several women had come forward to testify about his attempts to force them into servitude. He was awaiting trial, and the merchant said it did not look good for him. "It is over," Lena said that night, sitting by the fire with Ben. "He cannot hurt us any more." "No, he cannot," Ben agreed, but then he looked at her seriously. "But even if he had never been arrested, even if we had to keep running for the rest of our lives, I would not regret a single moment." "You are worth it, Lena. You have always been worth it." Lena kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into that kiss. "So are you," she whispered against his lips. "You saved me, Ben. In every way a person can be saved." "No," Ben said, pulling her into his lap so he could hold her close. "We saved each other." Spring came with a rush of green and wildflowers carpeting the meadows. Lena discovered she was pregnant in April, and Ben's joy was so pure and unguarded it made her fall in love with him all over again. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Lena asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ben said. "Terrified might be more accurate." "What do I know about being a father?" "What did you know about being a husband?" Lena pointed out. "And you have done just fine with that." Their son was born in December, 1 year almost to the day from their wedding. The labor was long and difficult, but Sarah was there to help, and when Lena finally held the squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "He is perfect," Ben said, his voice choked with emotion as he looked at his son. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas Benjamin Parker, after Tom Whitfield and his father. Tommy, for short. He had Ben's gray eyes and Lena's dark hair, and from the very beginning he had a strong will and a loud voice. "Takes after his mother," Ben would say with a grin whenever Tommy fussed. "Takes after his father," Lena would counter when the baby showed stubbornness about sleeping. The truth was, Tommy was the best of both of them, and they loved him with a fierceness that sometimes took Lena's breath away. The years passed, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. A daughter, Mary, arrived 2 years after Tommy, quieter than her brother but just as determined. Then another son, James, who arrived a year later with a sunny disposition and easy smile. Lena's sewing business grew until she had more work than she could handle. Ben and Tom expanded the ranch, bringing in more cattle and hiring additional hands to help with the work. The little foreman's house became too small for their growing family, and Ben spent one whole summer building an addition, adding 2 bedrooms and a larger kitchen. "We are putting down roots," Lena observed one evening as she watched Ben hammer the last shingle onto the new roof. "Real, deep roots." "Yes, we are," Ben agreed, climbing down to stand beside her. "Is that all right with you?" Lena thought about the girl she had been, running scared across the Arizona territory with nothing but desperation driving her forward. Then she looked at the life she had now. The home, the children, the man she loved standing beside her. "It is more than all right," she said. "It is everything." On their 5th wedding anniversary, Ben surprised her with a trip. He had arranged for Sarah to watch the children for a week, and he took Lena west toward California. "Where are we going?" Lena asked as they rode, though she suspected she knew. "You said you wanted to see the ocean," Ben reminded her. "I am a man of my word." They reached the California coast on a bright morning in June. Ben led her over a final rise, and there it was, the Pacific Ocean, vast and blue and glittering in the sunlight. Waves crashed against rocky shores, sending up spray that caught the light like diamonds. Lena stood at the edge of the continent and wept, but they were tears of joy. Ben held her hand and said nothing, understanding that this moment was about more than just seeing the ocean. It was about how far she had come, how much she had survived, how full her life had become. "Thank you," she said finally, turning to face him, "for everything. For saving me, for loving me, for giving me this life." Ben smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. You already thanked me, Lena. Every day, just by being you, just by choosing to stay. They spent 3 days by the ocean, walking the beaches, collecting shells, sleeping under the stars with the sound of the waves as their lullaby. Then they turned east and headed home, back to the mountains and the ranch and the children who were undoubtedly driving Sarah to distraction. When they rode into the valley, Tommy came running to meet them, shouting about all the things he had done while they were gone. Mary followed more sedately, carrying baby James on her hip. Sarah and Tom stood on the porch of the ranch house, waving. "This is home," Lena thought as Ben helped her down from her horse and Tommy grabbed her hand to drag her inside to see something important. This valley, these people, this life we have built together. The years continued to unfold. Tommy grew into a serious young man who loved books and learning as much as he loved working with the cattle. Mary showed a talent for healing and began apprenticing with the doctor in Alma. James was still young but showed signs of his father's easy way with horses and people. Lena and Ben grew older together, their hair streaked with gray, their hands marked by work and weather. But their love, if anything, grew stronger. They had built something lasting, something real. A family, a home, a life that neither of them had dared to dream possible. One evening, when the children were grown and the house was quiet, Lena and Ben sat on the porch of their home watching the sun set over the mountains. It was a scene they had enacted thousands of times over the years, but it never grew old. "You ever think about that first day?" Lena asked, her hand in Ben's. "When you rode into that canyon, all the time," Ben admitted. "I think about how different my life would be if I had just ridden past. If I had chosen to mind my own business." "Do you regret stopping?" Lena asked, though she knew the answer. Ben turned to look at her, and his eyes were full of love and certainty. "Lena Parker, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Stopping that day, choosing to help you, it was the first truly unselfish thing I had done in years, and it gave me everything. You, our children, this life, this home. I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the hard parts," Lena pressed. "The running, the fighting, the fear." "Not even those," Ben confirmed. "Because they led us here. They made us who we are, and who we are together is pretty damn good." Lena smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder, content. They had tracked across 3 territories and forded 4 rivers to get here. They had faced danger and hardship and moments when it seemed like the world was determined to tear them apart. But they had made it together, to this place of peace and love and belonging. She was worth every mile, Ben had said all those years ago. But the truth Lena had learned was simpler and more profound. They were worth every mile to each other, and that made all the difference. As the sun slipped below the mountains and stars began to prick through the darkening sky, Ben pulled Lena closer. "I love you," he said, simple and true. "I love you too," Lena replied. "Always have, always will." And in the gathering twilight, surrounded by the land they had made their own and the life they had built together, Benjamin and Lena Parker sat in perfect contentment, knowing that despite all the miles and all the trials, they had found exactly where they belonged, with each other, now and forever. Their grandchildren would later ask Lena to tell the story of how she and Grandpa Ben had met, and she would smile and begin. "It was in a canyon in Arizona Territory, and I was running for my life." And she would tell them about the man who appeared like an answer to a prayer, who stood up for her when he had no reason to, who crossed territories and forded rivers at her side, who loved her enough to stop running and build a home. "Was Grandpa your hero?" The children would ask, their eyes wide, and Lena would think about it, about the whole long journey from that desperate day in the canyon to this peaceful life surrounded by love. "No," she would say finally. "We were heroes for each other, and that is the very best kind of love story there is." The ranch continued to prosper under Tom and Ben's careful management, and eventually Tommy came home from his studies in Denver to help run it. He brought with him a wife, a schoolteacher named Anne, and together they gave Lena and Ben their first grandchildren, twin girls with their grandmother's dark hair and their grandfather's gray eyes. Mary followed her passion for healing and became a respected midwife and nurse, traveling throughout the territory to help women in childbirth. She married a doctor from Alma, and together they opened a small clinic that served the growing population of the valley. She gave Lena and Ben two grandsons who were as different as night and day, one quiet and studious, the other wild and adventurous. James took after his father in more ways than one, developing a wanderlust that eventually led him to work as a scout and guide for settlers moving west. But he always came home to the ranch eventually, regaling them with tales of his adventures. He married late, to a woman he met on the trail, a widow with two children of her own. Together, they gave Lena and Ben the most unexpected gift, a blended family that proved love could be found even after loss, through it all, through the births and the weddings and the inevitable losses that come with living a long life. Lena and Ben remained each other's constant. They worked side by side, raised their children together, welcomed grandchildren with open arms, and faced each new challenge as they had faced everything since that first day in the canyon, together. When Tom Whitfield passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, it was Ben who delivered the eulogy, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke of the man who had been not just an employer but a true friend. Sarah lived another 5 years after that, growing more frail with each passing season, but she never lost her sharp wit or her generous heart. When she finally slipped away one spring morning, Lena and Ben were at her bedside, holding her hands and thanking her for all she had done for them. The ranch passed to Tommy and Ann, but Ben and Lena stayed in their house, the one Ben had built with his own hands and expanded over the years. It was filled with memories now, every corner holding some piece of their life together. The rocking chair where Lena had nursed all 3 children. The kitchen table Ben had made for their 10th anniversary. The bedroom where they had shared countless nights, talking until sleep claimed them, making love with a passion that never fully dimmed, simply holding each other in the dark. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. Tommy had arranged for a photographer to come up from Alma, and they all posed together in front of the house. 3 generations of Parkers, all of them the fruit of that chance meeting in an Arizona canyon so long ago. In the photograph, Lena and Ben sit in the center, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Lena's hair is white now, pulled back in the same simple style she has worn for decades. Ben's face is weathered and lined, but his eyes are as sharp as ever, and his hand rests on Lena's shoulder with unmistakable tenderness. They are smiling, both of them, the kind of deep, satisfied smiles that come from a life well lived and love well earned. "Tell us the story, Grandma," one of the twins begged after the photograph was taken. "Tell us how you and Grandpa met." So Lena did, with Ben occasionally interjecting details or corrections, the two of them telling their story in the harmonious way of people who have told it many times before. The children listened, rapt as they heard about the chase, the canyon, the stranger on the buckskin horse who chose to help when he did not have to. "And Grandpa tracked you across 3 territories and 4 rivers?" the adventurous grandson asked, his eyes shining. Ben laughed. "Well, I would not say I tracked her exactly, more like we traveled together, covering a lot of ground before we found the right place to settle. But you did cross 3 territories, Lena said, counting on her fingers. Arizona, New Mexico, and we went into the edge of Colorado that one time, remember? And 4 rivers, Ben added. Verde, Gila, San Francisco, and Bill Williams, plus a whole lot of creeks and streams in between. Was Grandma worth it? Asked the quiet grandson, the one who always thought deeply about things. Worth all those miles? Ben looked at Lena, and the love in his eyes after 30 years was as clear and strong as it had been in the beginning. Worth every single one, he said. And I would cross 1,000 more if I had to do it all over again. Lena reached up to cover his hand with hers, her eyes bright with tears. So would I, she whispered. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Lena's hands grew too stiff for fine sewing, but she taught her granddaughters the craft, passing on the skills that had sustained her through so many years. Ben's body showed the effects of a lifetime of hard work, but he remained active, riding out to check on the cattle well into his 70s, refusing to be slowed down by age. They celebrated their 40th anniversary quietly, just the two of them, riding out to a favorite spot in the mountains where they could look down on the valley that had been their home for so long. They brought a simple picnic and spent the afternoon in companionable silence, content just to be together. 40 years, Lena mused, leaning against Ben as they sat on a sun-warmed rock. It feels like a lifetime and like no time at all. I know what you mean, Ben said. Sometimes I still see that girl in the canyon, scared but defiant, refusing to give up even when the odds were against her. And then I look at you now, and I see how strong you have become, how much you have accomplished, and I am in awe. I could not have done any of it without you, Lena said. You could have, Ben corrected gently. You would have found a way, you always do, but I am grateful I got to be part of the journey. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lena thought about all the sunsets they had watched together. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each one different, each one beautiful, each one a gift. I have no regrets, she said suddenly, about any of it. Not the running, not the fear, not even my father's debts. Because all of it, every hard moment and every frightening decision led me to you. And you were worth it all. Ben kissed her temple, a gesture as familiar as breathing. I love you, Lena Parker, more than I have words to say. I love you too, Lena replied, more than all the stars in the sky. They rode home as twilight fell, their horses knowing the way even in the growing darkness. Lights glowed in the windows of the ranch house, where Tommy and Ann were making dinner. Smoke rose from the chimney of their own little house, where a fire waited to warm them. This was home, solid and real and enduring, built on a foundation of love and trust and two people choosing each other every single day. Benjamin Parker was 76 when he died, peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night. Lena woke in the morning to find him beside her, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers as it had for 43 years. The grief was enormous, a wave that threatened to drown her, but even in her sorrow, Lena felt grateful. Grateful for every year, every day, every moment they had shared. Grateful that he had gone peacefully, without pain or fear. Grateful for the life they had built together. The whole valley came to his funeral. Cowboys and ranchers, townsfolk and neighbors, people whose lives Ben had touched in ways both large and small. They told stories about him, his fairness, his integrity, his quiet strength. They talked about how he had helped them when they needed it, never asking for anything in return. They spoke of his love for his family, his dedication to the land, his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. But it was Lena who spoke last, standing at the graveside with her children and grandchildren around her, her voice clear despite her tears. "Benjamin Parker was the best man I ever knew," she said. "He saved my life, not just once but every day we were together. He gave me a home when I had none, a family when I was alone, and a love so deep and true it sustained me through everything. He was worth every mile of the journey that brought us together, and I would not trade a single moment of our life for anything in this world. He was my husband, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. And even though he is gone, the life we built together continues in our children and their children. That is his legacy, and it is a good one." They buried him on a hillside overlooking the valley he loved, under a spreading oak tree. The headstone was simple: Benjamin Parker, 1850–1926. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he chose to help when he did not have to. Lena lived another 8 years after Ben's death, surrounded by her family and supported by the community she and Ben had been part of for so long. She spent her days sewing when her hands would allow it, playing with her great-grandchildren, and sitting on the porch of the house Ben had built, remembering, when her time came, it was quiet and easy, a simply letting go. Tommy found her in her chair on the porch, a blanket over her lap, a smile on her face. In her hand was an old photograph, her and Ben on their wedding day, young and hopeful and so in love it shone from their faces. They buried her beside Ben on the hillside, under the oak tree. Her headstone matched his in simplicity. Lena Norwood Parker, 1853–1934. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She was worth every mile. Years later, when the grandchildren had grown and had children of their own, they would still tell the story of Benjamin and Lena Parker. They would talk about the cowboy who tracked a woman across 3 territories and 4 rivers, who stood up for her when no one else would, who loved her enough to stop running and build a home. They would tell about the woman who was brave enough to run, smart enough to fight back when she had to, and wise enough to recognize love when she found it. The ranch continued, passing through the generations, each one adding to the legacy that Ben and Lena had started. The house they had lived in was preserved, turned into a kind of museum of their life together. Visitors could see the sewing machine Lena had used, the rifle Ben had carried, the photographs that documented their years together. But more than objects, what endured was the story. The story of 2 people who found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something beautiful together. The story of a love that crossed territories and forded rivers, that withstood danger and hardship and time itself. The story of a cowboy and a seamstress who proved that sometimes the best things in life are worth every mile it takes to find them, and in the end, that was the truth that echoed through the generations. Love, real love, is always worth the journey. No matter how long the road, no matter how many obstacles stand in the way, no matter how impossible it seems at first. When you find the person who makes you whole, who stands beside you through everything, who chooses you every single day, that person is worth every mile, every hardship, every sacrifice. Benjamin and Lena Parker knew that truth, lived it every day of their lives together, and left it as a legacy for all who came after. In the mountains of New Mexico, under the spreading oak tree on the hillside, they rest together still, their story complete, their love eternal, their journey finally at its peaceful end. The ranch house still stands, solid and strong, a testament to the life they built. The valley still blooms in spring with wildflowers, still turns gold in autumn, still sleeps under snow in winter. The rivers still run clear and cold, the mountains still stand tall against the sky. And somewhere in the wind that moves through the trees, in the light that dances on the water, in the warmth of the sun on the land they loved, the spirit of their love endures, a reminder to all who hear their story. True love is worth every mile, every moment, every beat of the heart. Always was, always will be. Forever and ever, world without end.